Hi, it's Lil Lisa. I'm going to show you today how I make my kimchi-style sauerkraut. It's not traditional sauerkraut by any means, but it's the kind that I like, and it's just a little thing I started doing, and I really like it, and it's pretty easy. Um, so the first thing is the ingredients that go into the vegetable portion, which is carrots, daikon radish, and cabbage. So I already prepped some of my carrots. I had a total of like 7 carrots. I just grabbed a bunch, various medium to large type carrots. So I already peeled them. I was going to show you how I chopped this particular one. So I cut them in half so that they're not longer than my knife. And then the small end I just cut into little slices. And I'm not overly particular about them all being exactly even, but you don't want them too thick because they won't really, you don't want to bite too big a chunk of carrot that's hard. They do soften as they ferment, but if they're hard, they won't soften quick enough for the cabbage. And then for the bigger half, I cut it in half and put the flat sides down on my board and just cut it into the same type of slices. So that way they're all similar amounts. Not exact, but close. So then I just throw it in the bowl that I prepped earlier. And then the other thing is daikon radish. Now I ordered these from Whole Foods. Sometimes I can find them at the farmer's market, but not always. So this is a daikon radish. Obviously the root end and the other end have been cut off and they can get very long. So Whole Foods just sells them in these chunks. And I actually had like probably another one that was this length, but a little thicker. And then I had two really small chunks, like maybe a third of this size. So I just peel it and I just put the peels in a bowl that I have, a garbage bowl over on my other counter, because I just stick all this kind of stuff into my compost bin. And these are, kind of spicy like a radish, have a good flavor, not super hot, um, but they're yummy. And they give it a nice flavor. And they are traditionally in kimchi. So I'm just going to go throw this in my garbage bowl real quick. Okay, so then I cut, because the ends are kind of dirty, I cut a real thin slice off of each end, just because they're a little dried out and dirty from when they cut them and then they shipped them. So, and then I cut it into half, and I cut those halves down, and then the same way as my carrots, but I cut these into quarters so that they're just, slightly bite-sized pieces, and then I just cut them into slices like that. So that's all I do, and I decided to just use all the daikon that came in my package. Daikon stuck on my hand. Um, which is probably a little bit more than what I really need for how much cabbage I have, but it's okay. It's really forgiving. You can put as many carrots as you want. You could add other vegetables if you had them. You really can do this however you want. Now, what's most important as far as how much is the volume of cabbage and or vegetables to the amount of salt, water. You just want to make sure your salt water proportions are correct as far as how much salt and water you need. Okay, so that's all done. So now for the cabbage, I did a bunch of it ahead of time, so I'm just going to show you a little bit. I have a wedge here, and I'm going to cut off one more small wedge. And you can hand cut your cabbage, just slice it up however you prefer. I'm just going to cut a little chunk off of here. I just tend, because this was a huge 10-pound head of cabbage, so I just cut sections off around the core. And I'm not going to waste the rest of this cabbage. I just won't use it for this. I'm going to make another dish with it for dinner. And so it's not going to go to waste. I just don't need it all for this, but it was a huge cabbage at the farmer's market for $5. So I was like, why not? So anyway, I have it cut. I'm just going to cut this into a little bit smaller stick, sort of. Makes it easier to feed it through the tube. And I wanted to have approximately 5 pounds of shredded cabbage. So I stuck my bowl on my scale, and it was at about 4 pounds right now. So then I do this with the shredding blade of the slicing blade of my food processor. It's just so easy. You can do it by hand. There's no shame in that. Sometimes I do if I'm just doing a small amount of cabbage. But when I'm doing a lot of cabbage, this just saves time. And for me, that's precious. So that's why I do it. So I just stick it in the tube and turn it on. It's going to be a little loud for a minute on low. And just keep feeding it through. And my scale shut off in the interim, so it didn't weigh it, but I knew where I was at, so that, and I had weighed out my chunk, so we're good. All right, so I'm just gonna put this in the sink, and I'll pick up all these little pieces. And honestly, if you have some shreds that are bigger and some that are smaller, it really, really, really doesn't matter. You could do it however you want. So, okay, so then the last step is to mix these together. And honestly, this is probably too much for this bowl, but it's the biggest bowl I had. And then I already made up salt water. This is what's important, the ratio of salt to water. So you want a quarter cup, 4 tablespoons of sea salt to every 4 cups of water. I did 8 cups of water with a half a cup of sea salt. I may not need all of this, but this was a lot of material. So I'm just going to pour this over until I see that there's water pretty much to the top of the vegetables, which is pretty much close to the top of the bowl. And we'll see. Yeah, it's going to take every bit of that. All right. All right, I'm going to put my weight on it. And if I need to make more salt water, I will. I wasn't sure how much I would need. So what I do to weigh this down is I take a plate, I put it on top, and then I'm going to put a weight on top of this and press it down. I am going to need more liquid, so I'll do that off camera. But basically, I'm going to take I have this really heavy granite mortar and pestle. I'm just going to put that as my weight, and it will weigh it down. And then I'm just going to leave it to soak for several hours up to overnight. So I usually do 3 or 4 hours. Today it's probably going to be closer to 5 hours till I get a chance to do the rest. So I will be back and show you after it's soaked how you do the rest of the kimchi and get it ready to ferment. Okay, we're back after we soaked our vegetables, and we're getting ready to finish the kimchi-style sauerkraut so it can ferment. So I have some stuff in the blender because I'm going to make like a paste sauce that you mix with the vegetables after you drain them. So I've got 2 onions. I'm doing like a double batch. So I've got 2 onions, some ginger, and garlic. And I have one more clove of garlic to do. And I just wanted to, the way that I tend to peel garlic, especially for something like this where I don't need the whole clove because I'm going to puree it, is I just smash it with my knife, the flat side of my knife, a couple times, and it loosens up the skin and it will peel right off. And this is really fresh garlic, so the skins are a little harder to peel because they're very sticky still. They're not as dried. So I have that piece just stored in there. And then this one's probably going to be a little bit harder to peel. Oh, came right off. I like to get that little membrane on there too if I can. Sometimes it won't come off. There we go. Okay. Now, ginger. I already put 1 chunk, but I need a little bit more because this is a double batch. So I was just going to show you an easy way to peel ginger. I keep my ginger in the freezer because it grates really easy when it's frozen. So I am going to just, with the edge of a knife, just scrape it, and it makes it really easy to peel because it's very knobby, and so vegetable peeler is a little bit more difficult. So I find that this is a really easy way, and I just go around. And either frozen or fresh, either way, it works really well. This one's starting to get a little bit defrosted, which is fine. Sometimes in the little crevices you have to use a knife, but there we go. I can get in the middle there. Okay, I just got it with my hand. Okay, so I'm just going to cut off this little chunk. I don't need all of it. And I'm going to just cut this into some little slices to put in the blender so it blends thoroughly. And that, pick up some of the peel. That's going to go in here. And then I will put this in the sink. And okay, so I have this ready to blend. Oh, I'm going to put, we like ours with a little bit of spice. You can put as much as you want. You can put a fresh pepper. My cayennes are not ready yet in my garden. So I have some that I dried last year. I'm just going to take the top off of one and put the whole thing in there. Just one for the whole batch. It'll probably be a little more spicy than I like, but my family likes it spicy. And then I will blend this up, and then I'm going to add the last ingredient to the paste, or second to last ingredient, I guess. Okay, so I'm going to do the vegetables next and show you what we have to do. So I added, after I taped the first segment, I added 4 more cups of salted water. So it was 4 cups with a 1/4 cup of salt. And I couldn't really see the water over the vegetables yet, but I could see just, like if I pushed down, I could see the edge of where the water was. So then I put the plate on in my weight. As the salted water sits in the vegetables, it will draw out more water from the vegetables. So it kept rising. So about an hour ago, I took the weight off because I didn't want it to end up overflowing. And it's still, the plate held the vegetables down. Okay, so now you need to drain it. It's heavy. So I have another pot. You want to save the brine in case you need it. Oh, there we go. Okay. So drain the brine off. And then basically you want to taste one of the vegetables. I'm just going to taste a little piece of carrot. You want it to taste pretty salty like the sea, like seawater. But you don't want it so salty that you're like, can't handle it. I mean, it's going to taste saltier than you would normally eat it, but. So then put the vegetables back in here. And reserve that brine in case you need it when you pack your jars. So these taste perfect. If there's not enough salt, like you just don't feel like they're nicely salted, like the sea, you can add a little bit of salt, maybe a teaspoon or 2, and mix it up. If they taste like so salty that it makes you pucker and you can't take it, then you can rinse them real quick, but still reserve the brine. Okay, so we've got our big bowl of veggies. Okay, so now we're going to make the paste. So I've got all that in there. I'm going to blend it. It's going to be loud for a minute till it's a nice smooth paste. And then I'm going to add this Korean pepper flakes. These are, I don't know how to pronounce it, but anyway, I got these at Whole Foods in a jar. The Korean chili flakes. They're kind of like mild. They're not like a real spicy type pepper. So I just add, I don't really measure. I just dump it in there till it gives me a nice reddish color. So with this, I'll probably add a good maybe 1/4 cup or something, at least 3 tablespoons. So I'm going to puree this and we'll go from there. Sometimes the onion is juicy enough that it will blend without putting the liquid in, but it's not a big deal to put a little bit in. I'm just going to put like 1/2 cup to give it enough liquid to blend. Okay, so now I'm going to add the chili pepper. Now I need to grab my kraut pounder. I forgot that. I actually asked my husband to grab it. Oh, that's strong. Onions, garlic, and ginger. Okay, I added probably about a quarter cup. We'll see how that looks. I'm going to pulse it just real quick to get that pepper mixed in. You could probably put the pepper in with it, but I like to kind of be able to tell how smooth it is. All right, that looks pretty good. All right. Now, the only other ingredient that's in traditional kimchi is fish sauce. Now, instead of the hot chili pepper that I put in, you could put in like a chili garlic paste from like the Asian store. With that and with the fish sauce, you want to make sure that it doesn't have like preservatives like sodium benzoate or potassium benzoate or any of those things in it. This one has anchovy, sea salt water, and sugar. So it doesn't have any of those other preservatives. So that's why we buy this brand at Whole Foods. So you can add however much you want. I personally don't love fish sauce. The rest of my family loves it in the kimchi. So I usually don't add it to my blend, and I pack one jar, and then I add, whoops, that was a good catch. Add some to the rest of the cabbage mixture before I pack it in the other jar. So then we'll have one with fish sauce and one without. I'll eat it with fish sauce. I just don't love it. So anyways, that I'm not going to add it to here, but you can if you're fine with the fish sauce. So I'm just going to scrape this off of the lid, get all these goodies, or I guess not, maybe get them all because they just fell on the counter. See, this isn't a real cooking show. I don't know what I'm doing here. But there's a lot stuck here that I don't want to waste. Okay, one more corner. Now I'm just going to, now if you don't have a high-speed blender or you don't want to do it this way, you can just chop up the onion, grate the ginger, and mince the garlic with like a garlic press or a knife or whatever, and mix that together with like a mortar and pestle and a little bit of like salt or liquid and make it into a paste by hand. That's probably more traditionally how they did it. I just think it's easy to throw it in the blender and do it, so that's kind of how I do it. So now you just mix this into your vegetables. And I would advise not to do this part if you can help it with your hands, because there is spicy chili in it. If you put spicy chili in it, and you don't want to end up with burning hands or touch your eyes or anything like that. Smells good. Rinse my hands off. All right, I'm gonna grab a wooden spoon. I think it'll be easier to mix this. Now I just sort of guesstimated on the amount of paste for this amount of cabbage because I don't usually make this big a batch. So it might end up needing more, in which case I'll have to make some more later. But it should be okay to start anyway. I'm going to add a little bit of liquid here just to make it a little bit easier to stir. So traditionally, kimchi is made with Napa cabbage. I'm not a huge fan of Napa cabbage. I just don't love the texture. It gets a lot softer than green cabbage. So I basically just make it with the green cabbage. It's not traditional, but I like it and my family will eat it, and it's still fermented and delicious. If you wanted to use Napa, you could either shred it like this if you wanted, or traditionally they either ferment it whole, like in a crock, small heads, or big heads they'll cut in like quarters, and basically mix in the radish and the carrot and then the paste and fish sauce and everything, and put it in like crocks. I don't know if you could fit like a Napa cabbage in here, but you could cut it or even shred it by hand, however you want it. But you can use Napa cabbage. That's actually more traditional. It's just my personal preference. I think this is pretty good. If I find a clump that's not mixed, I can. All right. Now, you can use your hands. I sometimes put a glove on and use my hands, but since I don't have a glove with me, I loaned my box of gloves to my neighbor. I don't know if he brought them back. They might be on my porch. I'm going to do it like this and use my kraut pounder to push it down when I get it in there. So you just fill your jar. I'm using half-gallon jars. You can, use a quart jar or whatever you want. These just work better because when we put it in the fridge, we just eat it. So it doesn't use up as many of my quart jars. Now you're going to want to make sure that you have enough brine to cover the vegetables and that you have some head space in the jar. So you're going to put it down, but you don't want to like pat it down and then still have the jar super, super full, because it will ferment and get more liquid, and you want room for it to not ooze out everywhere. All right, I'm going to push this down and see how we go. So I have my kraut pounder that I use for my sauerkraut. I'm going to push down with that instead of my hands today. And as you push down, you're going to see it releases, because you soaked it, it releases a lot of liquid. Like it pretty much covers the material, which is exactly what you want. If you push it down and it doesn't do that, then add some of the soaking water brine, enough so that it covers the vegetables. And I have quite a bit of liquid in the bottom of here that I'll put some in there too. I might need to get a ladle. I've got one right here. Once I added the brine, I didn't really need to add the brine, but it made it easier for me to mix, so it's not going to hurt anything. So just keep packing it in the jar, and then I'm going to push this down and see where we're at, because it will compress down quite a bit because it's soft from soaking. Oh yeah, I'm doing pretty good here. I think I'm just going to add a little bit more. Okay. I think that's going to do it. Now, you don't want this stuff to float up outside of the liquid. That's how you can get mold. And you want it to have a way that as it ferments, it will produce carbon dioxide. You want to be able to let that out. So you either need to put a jar lid on it and burp it every day, or sometimes in the beginning when it's really fermenting, a couple times a day, to let that CO2 out. What I do instead, I find it just to be easier when I'm using jars. My crock has weights and a water chamber, so it lets the air out, lets the CO2 out without letting air into mold. And sometimes I do make this in my crock, but our crock's got sauerkraut, and I didn't want to make it in the really big one, so I'm just using jars. So I got these on Amazon. They're called the Easy Fermenting, I think, and you can buy a kit or buy separate. But you have the glass weights that have a little handle, which is nice. So I'm going to put this weight. Now for this jar, it's a little bit smaller, but that's okay. It works really well in a quart or a pint jar. You need wide mouth, but that's okay. I'm going to add a little bit of liquid just because now that I weighed it down, it's not quite covering it as much. And because the weight's a little smaller than my material, I'm going to make sure it's well covered. So I'm going to go like that just to make sure. And then I put this has a valve, so it lets the CO2 out without letting air in for mold. And it's got a little ring on it that you can put the date. So today's the 17th. So I'll just put 17 and then I know when I started it. So I just screw this on in place of the regular lid and let it sit. How long it takes to ferment is really up to you. When you'll see it start getting bubbly, like tomorrow it'll be really bubbly. When it's not quite as bubbly, there still may be some bubbles, but it's not really, really active, is usually when I taste it and see. If it's still really, really salty and not as flavored as I expect it, then I let it keep going. If it tastes like I like it, then I stick it in the fridge. It depends on your temperature, humidity, all that stuff on how fast it ferments. If I leave it up here, I don't know, I'll probably taste it in like a week and see how it's doing. Maybe seems like it will be sooner. It'll kind of, I keep an eye on it. I usually set these in my basement, so it takes a little bit longer. But you know, it could take anywhere from 1 week to like 4 weeks. It just really depends on how you like it and weather and temperature and all that kind of stuff. So that's all there really is to it. I'm just going to keep filling my jars and putting my weights in, and that's all there is to the kimchi. Bye.